Hey, friends. Welcome back to Strength Happens. We're so glad you're here with us.
If you're new, we're two moms who became friends because of our daughters, both of whom have disabilities and complex medical needs. We've been navigating the world of special education for years, and it's back to school season, which always brings up a lot.
And if you're anything like us, this time of year can feel complicated. There's the hope of a fresh start and also the stress of new teachers, new routines, new IEPs, new everything.
So, in today's episode, we'll be sharing how we prepared our kids and ourselves for a smoother transition back to school. We'll talk about accommodations, emotional prep, practical survival skills, and how we've learned to navigate and advocate for our child without burning out.
Feel free to take notes and pause when needed. And remember that this is designed to help you stop and think about what your child needs and figure out ways to make it happen.
Why don't we start with the emotional side for our kids? Back to school can always seem overwhelming, all the way from preschool and kindergarten on up to high school. And with the younger ones, even if they don't express it directly, there's a few things that have worked for us over the years.
One big thing to do is start routines early. You may think that the end of the summer is coming and you want to get them all ready to go the day before. That's not going to work for a lot of our kiddos.
Yeah.
You need to really start moving back your bedtime routine, maybe even by a half an hour each night.
We did that too. We always tried to work on getting back on a good sleep schedule, but we tried to make it fun. One thing we did with our kids was we always got them a little alarm clock for their bedside
Mhm.
that they could put up on their own, and they'd set the alarm clock before they go to bed. And when they were little, this started teaching them responsibility and some of those executive functioning things. But they thought it was cool because they got to pick out what kind of alarm clock they wanted. And it became an exciting way to get in that back to school routine. Did you guys ever do anything to help with the back to school shopping?
Well, we would try to go early so that way they had more control over what they were buying and they could get things that got them excited to want to go back to school, like the backpack and lunchbox from Justice or the Disney store with Morgan. She'd pick out her favorite stuff and that would create a little bit of excitement to start
Yeah.
school. Obviously, the clothes shopping,
All the things to fill the backpack too, like a new pack of crayons, the scissors, and it gives them a sense of control.
hard thing too is that every school, at least here, has a list and you have to get the things that are approved off the list. So sometimes that can cause some anxiety with the kids that don't like change. So it's really important to make sure you're getting those lists before you go out and start shopping too soon.
We always had a back to school letter that would come from the school telling them their teacher, their classroom. So that always brought some great excitement.
What else did you guys do to help get them ready for going back to school?
Yeah, so probably my hardest one was Hallie. She had a lot of sensory issues. Change was exceptionally hard for Hallie. She had a form of neurodiversity called sensory integration dysfunction. And so change was hard, new schedules were hard, and she really thrived off structure and routine. So every school year, one of the things we did was we'd have like a visual schedule or like a social storyboard, and these can really be game changers. Having a picture schedule the school day, saying like getting out of bed. So there's a picture of her bed, or brushing your teeth, or a picture of having breakfast in the morning. And even going when you do the meet the teacher day, taking a picture of the classroom and incorporating that into the little story screen. We would actually have them laminated and punch a little hole at the top and put them on a ring. So the week or two before school, she'd start practicing her morning routine. And we'd have an after school routine too, like snack time, rest time, homework time. And it was a little way to help her with that.
Yeah, even from Morgan, empty your backpack, take your lunchbox out of the backpack. Just simple things like that were things that we had to work on with her.
But I think when they're little, these storyboards or these little laminated cards can help them with that new routine. Or if there's a change in routine, maybe they have physical therapy on Tuesdays. So you can clip in the extra card that says, oh, it has them in a car going to PT. So they know when they get in the car, oh, look, after school, my new thing in the afternoon is to go to PT. So it's one of those other ways that can help them when some days have a switch in their schedules. We always also did the 5 point method. I made this up with Hallie, and it was we would take our hand, and on the thumb, we would say, okay, today you're going to go to school. And on the next finger of her hand, we'd say, you're going to take a test. And the next finger of her hand, we'd point to that finger and say, you're going to come home, and Grammy will be here. So we could go through the different things by just tapping each finger. And then if something changed, like Grammy couldn't make it, I'd go through her hand. And when we got to the one that represented Grammy, we would skip that and say Grammy couldn't make it, but we replaced it with making ice cream after school or something like that. So
Yeah.
it helped with that transition.
So the disappointment too of what they expected.
Right. Trying to just anticipate when kids have trouble with change, anticipate that and prepare them for it and just make a quick transition. Kids are going to feed off our energy, whether we're nervous, we're anxious, but if we can
Mhm.
reframe it in a positive light, I think our kids will find that as well. I also found too, as well as our social stories, finding books that were helpful for them. And I know we'll have a list of books in the show notes for this on our website, but my kid's favorite was The Kissing Hand, which I think is a great
That
book.
one's a great book. Yeah.
And then The Pigeon Has to Go to School. So if you haven't read that one, that's a great one for your kids going back to school.
Yeah, there's so many different stories, and you really can just search based on anxiety or loneliness or whatever it is, and there's a picture book to match it nowadays, like for every theme you can think of.
I love that. And you're the early childhood education person, so you know all those. You always steered me to the right books and things, resources for my
Yeah.
kids. So I appreciate that. Can you think of anything else that was helpful when your kids were little?
For us, a lot was previewing the space prior to school. And because Morgan has a visual impairment, it was really important for her to walk the space without extra people. But early years, it was really important for us to go preview the space. Was she going to have to step up onto concrete? Is she going to have to step down
The
into
transition pieces.
gravel? Yeah, any of the transition places. Go out to the playground, see if there's anything out there that would maybe be a problem. It allowed me to have a preview also of where things needed to be addressed and where we could make sure that she wouldn't be injured because she would be apt to fall because with her she'd trip over something and then her brain would tell her something was in the way. So there was a delay in that processing. So it was about keeping her safe.
Sounds like the schools were very open to allowing you to kind of explore the not just the classroom, but the school itself for to anticipate where any issues may be. So you could kind of
Yeah.
help the teacher navigate her safety and her ability to
Yeah.
play and have fun too.
Well, and then we could go in the classroom and then meet teacher. I would bring my camera and take pictures of things and create social stories like you were mentioning to make sure that she was familiar with what she was anticipating to be around. Morgan's pretty good with transition anyways, but I think a lot of it was for my peace of mind.
Right. As moms, we worry, and that's our number one job. Those are great ideas. One of the things that we did, Hallie's speech was delayed. So I would often ask for her to go in to meet the teacher a little early where there weren't as many kids around to get overstimmed and scared. But one of the things I would do is I take pictures around the classroom for myself because when I'd ask Hallie about her day, and I knew she sat next to someone named Lizzie, I could be like, "Oh, how was Lizzie today?" But I had only known that because I toured the classroom too and saw her name tag next to that girl. So it was a way to get her conversation going when she got home.
Yeah.
So
It's hard when they don't have the ability to communicate their needs, their wants, or just what went on in their day. And we have to find ways to help them be able to tell their stories.
one of my hardest things as being a mom, because I know transitions are hard for Hallie, but they're also hard for me. But we found that predictability is powerful. So if she knows what's going to happen during the day, it would kind of ease her mind. And you may have a little anxiety associated with that change because of things that have happened in the past. So making sure it's as peaceful and smooth as possible. But also, one thing I've learned is that keeping in mind, no matter how much you prepare, they may still be upset when we drop them off. And the best thing we can do is drop them off and leave because if we cry, they cry. Right. So allowing us that time for separation and knowing the teachers know what they're doing and they've done a great job in the past. It's not the first kid they've worked with. So it's okay to let go. And I also made a transition for me. So I would have a plan for me that first day because I would get anxious and sad.
Well, I think because we had such a hard start with the girls. It's hard to relinquish that control and allow someone else to take care of them, even though that's what's best for both of us. Like Morgan, Hallie, you, and
Yeah, you're so right. Our kids may not always show it with words, but they really do feel that shift when we go from summertime back to school. Did your kids ever show any sleep issues or knew that, or even communicate that to you that they were having a tough time with that transition back to school?
when they were younger, they were always more excited to go back. I don't think we saw more sleep things or anxiety until middle school after puberty started. That's when a lot of more the anxiety, the ADHD came out for the girls. But Morgan, she adjusts pretty easily.
She really does. She's so laid back with transitions and
For the most part, as you were saying about some of Hallie's transition and anxiety with Morgan, she likes to tell you what the schedule is for the whole day. She always wants to anticipate what's coming up. So, because she still doesn't have the ability to communicate fully, I think she is very anxious, and that her control is knowing what's going to happen. And through the day, if the teacher didn't do puzzle time next, and that's what was on the schedule, sometimes it would trip her up a little bit. She'd get hyper focused on the fact that they weren't doing that next thing. So then they would have to try to find a way to redirect her. Even at home, we go to a restaurant, we have dinner with a couple of our friends, and we call it Morgan Monday. Every day she'll go, what are we doing Monday? And she always wants to know when it's happening. And she'll constantly ask us what's going to happen next. And I think that's her way of dealing with the anxiety. That's her way to control.
yeah, I think it's just finding ways that work for each of our kids individually, right? And that's what we as parents do is we find our kids can come from the same parents, be totally different in their coping strategies. So really curtailing some of those coping strategies specifically to each child and not just as an individual, but where they are in stage of life. So how they coped in
Right.
kindergarten, first, second may be different than sixth and seventh, and is going to be different as they get older throughout school. I know Morgan had an IEP. Did your girls have 504 plans? And do you mind telling us the difference between an IEP and a 504?
An IEP is an individualized education plan, and those are for students who need special education services. And that would include specialized instruction and related services like occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, vision therapy. There's so many things that that could encompass. And those would all be on one documentation. And that would be something that the school legally has to provide for your child based on what you've all determined in a meeting that you have with the teachers and all the therapists and anyone that's involved in your child's education. And
And
they're the professionals.
how is an IEP different from a 504 plan?
Well, the 504 for students who need accommodations but not special education. I'd be
Okay.
providing accommodations to allow students to fully access their general education. There'd be no stepping stone. So, like Katie has auditory processing, so we had to make accommodations for that. She'd take tests in separate room because the testing in a quiet environment wouldn't be distracted and could hear what was being asked of her. It could include peanut allergies and making sure that they could have their EpiPen at school. The ADHD, ADD accommodations. It's to make sure that anything that a student needs can be accommodated for, but it doesn't need to go through the larger process of what an IEP entails.
Right. So I had 2 kids with IEPs. So Hallie had a full scale IEP under OHI or other health impaired, as did B. And then Neely had a 504. Most of hers was for her peanut allergies and some of those. But some of the accommodations that we incorporated, especially with Hallie when she was younger, are like preferential seating. So she has a processing delay and typically only had trouble remembering
Mhm.
things in sequential order, especially like 5 steps. So if you put her near a door or a window, she would just get distracted easily by that. So we'd put her closer to the teacher's desk or offering extra time on tests. As you were saying with Katie, she didn't need specialized instruction on the material, but she needed extra time or in a quieter place to take that test. We had nurse instructions on medications. We had, if the kids passed out, what do they do? Like we had a safety protocol on medical emergencies. We had sensory breaks where Hallie could take a break and go into a quiet corner in the classroom if she got overwhelmed. We had a lot of assistive technologies. So Hallie's hands were disabled. So when she was in kindergarten, she had an Alpha Smart, and as she got older, she got a laptop. She also had teachers wore the FM amplifier around their neck and it would go straight to her hearing aid. She could hear instruction without the background noise. And one of the things she got introduced to in high school the year before she passed was a smart pen. The teacher would write everything on this board that uses the smart pen and it would project it on the screen. It would audio record the teacher's lecture and it would video record the teacher writing the instructions. And then all that would be downloaded to their online learning system. But some of those assistive technologies helped other students as well. There's a ton of accommodations that our kids can have as they're growing up with special education and course and IEPs. I know Morgan and your kids may have a little bit different.
Because of her arthritis, we had to make sure the height of her desk and chair were appropriate.
Mm,
Usually the OT and PT would come in and evaluate for some of those things, and they would determine best height for sitting and desk height. Her doctor would provide a letter of accommodation from the arthritis doctor specifically based on everything that they felt she should or shouldn't do based on flares, and that if she fatigues her easily and that she can't get up and down from a seated position on the ground, and she didn't have upper body strength, so even just getting up and down is a lot of work for her.
would you let people know ahead of time? Because Morgan may have more trouble communicating, as you said. Would you let teachers know in advance of some of these needs?
We would typically, at open house, give them a one pager that we would create that highlights all her strengths or weaknesses or things that they need to be aware of any personality trait, things that may or may not be an issue or come up. And then I would try to touch base with them again within a week or two once they got to know her. Because with Morgan, at first, she's not going to really talk to you. And if she does, she's very hard to understand. So until you get to know her and you start to like watch the world around her, you can start to pick up what she's talking about better. So for a teacher, it may take them a month or two for them to really get to know her and understand what she's even talking about half the time. But I think it's important though to always make sure you're following up. Our situation is a little different because Morgan was in a self contained classroom where Hallie was mainstream. So there's a big difference in our classroom may have had 8 or 10 kids.
Right.
Your classrooms were 20 to
20.
25. So it was a lot easier for us to have those conversations. But if it was something more substantial, we would either the teacher or I would request extra time or meeting.
We used to have something very similar. You're right, it is very different, some of the classroom changes when it's an inclusion classroom versus a mainstream class. For us, we had a one pager as well. It was called the Hallie handout. And when she was in elementary school, we made it more fun with like a little photo of her
Yeah.
and we put down a little bio about her. Hallie was born with a rare chromosome deletion. We were told she'd never walk, never talk, never eat, be cognitively impaired, and she's loves to read books and she has 125 IQ. We wanted them to know what she had been
Yeah.
through so they would appreciate that coming to school is a huge feat for her, right? But we would share fun things like she has a dog named Santa Bear. She loves the color pink. She will compliment your jewelry. And Hallie would always go up to the teacher and be like, is that Brighton? Are those Brighton earrings? Like, she likes
Gosh.
certain brands of jewelry, and teachers would love to get a compliment from Hallie because 'cause she'd be like, "Oh, that scarf is gorgeous on you." And she was into fashion, but so we would give them some information about who she was as a person so that they could connect with her even if her speech was a little delayed, and once you get her on a topic that was important to her, like fashion or jewelry, she'd talk your ear off. But it was getting her past that social barrier. But then we'd also have tips and tricks, like, putting her chair near the teacher's desk. And we'd have tips for teaching Hallie, and it would be put your hand on her shoulder if there's something you want to say you don't want her to forget. Because neurologically, when you put your hand on her shoulder, it would trigger her brain to focus. We also would have a tip or trick about putting a post it note on the desk and writing the top 3 things that Hallie needs to work on that day. We'd also say allowing space for her assistive technology, her laptop. And I think the other thing we had to really do was really about the medical. She would pass out easily. I was like, if she turns white as a ghost, it's time to send her home, and what to do. And it would have those things so a teacher didn't feel too overwhelmed. The first day of school, we kind of give them a prep. So we would always try and start the school year with our teachers and our speech pathologists or with a little gift card to Starbucks.
Yeah, those are all great suggestions. And I think the most important thing is making sure that you can provide a good overall picture of your child because no one knows them better than you.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think it's important for parents to know to always remember that it's okay to ask questions. You're allowed to follow up with the teacher. As you said, we know them better than anyone and we're their best advocates. But sometimes I also had to learn for myself some survival tips for me. And my biggest survival tip I learned from a teacher whose first year it was teaching. She had Hallie Heilman as her student. This teacher, one was from FSU, already set me up. If you know Florida sports, I was from UF Gators, and this teacher was a Seminole from FSU. And she was a brand new teacher. It was her first year of teaching, and she put me in my place and taught me that I need to let Hallie be independent, but I also needed to take care of myself. And I remember I would come in third grade and take Hallie's agenda out, put it on the table, and I put her post it note on with her top three things to work on. And Miss Dean would say, finally said one day about the first end of the first week, Miss Heilman, with all due respect, no coming into my classroom anymore. Hallie's very capable of doing this on her own. You need to go home and take care of yourself and have enjoy this time when your child's not here, but let me take care of Hallie and let Hallie take care of herself. And I no longer walked her in. I walked her to the pod and I stopped and she went in and Miss Dean gave me updates. She's like, she's independent. She's very capable. But I also learned to take care of me and that I have to let go of some of that anxiety and worry at the start of every school year.
Yeah. That was good teacher advice.
It was very good teacher advice. I think this is where kids are resilient and they are so capable that we have to remind ourselves to maybe there's some things for that back to school time that we have to prepare ourselves to let our kids go off to school.
Yeah.
Can you think of any things that have helped you, like a survival strategy from being a mom? I know for us, one of the things is creating like a back to school folder or binder with my kids' information. At least with my kids' medical information, I'd have a backup copy. So if they lost it or they're going on a field trip, I could just pull it up, but I'd have that just in case, right? So I'd always have backup copies of the IEP, their emergency contacts, and EpiPens. um, you think of anything that worked for you guys that was helping you calm down at the start of the school year?
I'd say probably the same thing as we started a folder for each kid and anything that I provided to the school, I would keep in that folder because things get lost. So for us, keeping a folder with any doctor accommodations, any doctor notes, each school year had to be a new form so Morgan could get tube fed in school. So just having those everything in place ahead of time and in one location because if all of a sudden the nurse is like, oh, I can't locate it, and then the teacher can't locate it, I don't have to go back to the doctor and ask for all new forms. So the more stuff I could keep myself organized with their stuff, the less anxious I was. And then I feel like it's less anxious the kids will be. So it's just the trickle down.
Yeah, we did very similar things, it sounds like. We never
Yeah.
even talked about this when our kids were little, but we did very
You just
similar
did it.
things.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
just do it.
you had to.
Another
Anything
thing I
else?
would always do is make sure I had a go bag in the car because I have 4 kids. You're never home, but always having a bag of stuff in the car, emergency medicine, I'll be out and then Morgan needs to be tube fed. So then having extension
Emergency supply.
tubes and yeah, all the things I need to tube her because other than that, then she doesn't eat. And then a change of clothes because you know that I'm going to spill something from the feeding tube and then it's going to make her shirt wet and then that's going to irritate her and then she'll perseverate that about that for hours on end until that shirt is off. So to save my sanity, changes of clothes, little games, magnet boards, matchbox cars, a snack. There's always something available for them. Keep a favorite blanket or a favorite stuffed animal in the car.
Say a
Things that are
toy or
going to keep
something.
them calm.
We used to do things very similar. We had an emergency bag for the hospital, and then we had the car line school bag. Some very similar things. Sometimes my kids, I think all my kids pretty much had sensory issues to one extent or another. So we'd have extra pairs of socks. We'd have extra medical supplies when Hallie had a feeding tube,
Mhm.
Band-Aids, anything like that. normal mom stuff. We'd always have juice boxes because an OT taught me this trick that sucking on a straw or a lollipop would calm the neurologic system when they were having sensory overload, especially Hallie. So we'd always have some juice boxes in the car because she'd get in the car after school and be absolutely mentally spent, having to hold her emotions and sensory issues together. So having that juice box, sucking on a straw, or having snacks, all my kids are hangry. And even though our drive home was short, it was made a huge difference. So when we transitioned into the house, we had already had the little meltdown in the car, but we kind of nipped it in the bud. So having those few little things was always nice, and having the little toys for car line while you're waiting for another kid. Are there any other tips you have for parents?
Yeah. I know. I think the biggest thing is your expectation as a parent. You want them to accomplish everything in a timely manner. But I think, especially when you have neurodivergency, any cognitively impaired child or medically complex, their first week or first couple weeks back to school is really survival mode. There's nothing else that is more important than helping them survive those first couple weeks and let them feel like it's an accomplishment, that they didn't fail. Just kind of go with what you feel is best for the moment. And it's okay to take a couple steps back. That I think as society, we're so eager to push our kids forward and accomplish this and be successful at everything you do, where their biggest lessons are going to be from their failures.
That's so true. That's so true.
Not that I want them to fail, but I think just taking it day by day.
And knowing they don't have I think you said a great point, knowing they don't have to have everything down pat perfectly that first week of school. It may take them a little longer. It may not be the same as every other kid in the neighborhood, right? So, it's okay to give them grace for themselves, but also for you as a mom, you're doing a great job. I know those first week of school, my kids were always exhausted, and I would just give them the biggest hug that when they got home, like, "You survived. You made it through
Yeah.
the first day of school." And we'd have a little snack after school, and then we'd work on what we needed for the next day, signing the forms. I didn't need to cook a perfect meal every night that first week. They were gonna survive if I had to order a pizza one night, they're gonna be okay. I will make sure they are loved and know that they are supported in that transition back to school because it's hard on them, but it's also hard on us. It's a lot to absorb their big emotions in those early years especially, but even when they get harder.
I don't know. I think as overall we put a lot of expectations on ourselves and on the teachers and the school, and it's not that we're trying to be overbearing or we're wanting more than what a school is supposed to provide. But all of our kids, regardless of whether they have an IEP, a 504, or they're in the gifted program, every single one of those kids needs to have their needs met. And all you're doing as a parent is advocating for your child. Don't feel guilty about it. It's something that they're supposed to provide.
Absolutely. There's a story that kind of stands out to me in those early years of when we had to help Hallie navigate entering the school system. We fought to get her in her neighborhood school and to allow her to be mainstreamed. Her principal fought us from the beginning. And it was the time I really realized that my voice was important in the school process as much as Hallie's voice was important. And I remember that first day of school, and her Alpha Smart wasn't on her desk, and we had done the whole transition plan from preschool. And I asked her teacher, I said, "Where's her Alpha Smart?" And the teacher said, "You need to go talk to the principal." And I went up to the front office, and the secretary goes, "I'll get her." And the principal comes up and she looks at me after I asked where Holly's Alpha Smart was. And the principal said, "No 5-year-old needs a computer at this school, nor will a 5-year-old ever get one." And I said, "Ma'am, it's part of her IEP, it's part of her assistive technology. It is a law that you must provide her that." And I am not confrontational, but I stood up. I was my tallest 5'3" self. I mean, she was probably like 5'8". And I was like, "This is not up for discussion. This is her right in her education plan." She goes, "Not in my school." And she turned and she walked off. I walked outside, and I've never been more glad to have a husband who's an attorney in my life. I called John and I was like, "Hey, can you send over a letter to the district on your letterhead?" So he sent over a letter. I am a disability advocate. I called the assistive technology person. And surprisingly, there was an Alpha Smart on her desk the next day, but they didn't give her access to a printer. And so every time the teacher wanted something, we had to take the Alpha Smart home, hook it up to a printer, and print it. And we
Wow,
would go around in circles every year with that principal.
that's crazy.
It really is. And I hate that there are times and places where not everybody has those amazing teachers like we were always
Right.
blessed with. We've had some administrators who didn't understand what the laws were protecting our children. And there's the ADA, and there is the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504. But also in the public school systems from preschool through, 22 in high school, the Individualized Disability Education Act. And I know in our society laws are changing, but it is my hope that we keep all those laws at the forefront because we as parents also have a social responsibility to advocate not just for our children, but the laws that protect our children because they're so important when it comes to our kids in the school systems today. And those laws, next time, we'll talk about how the laws are a little different for college, but I don't want any parent to ever be ashamed to stand up for their kid or advocate for them. We can do it in a professional and kind manner, but also making sure that our kids get the services that they're entitled to under the law.
Yeah,
Sorry, I got on a tangent, but
that's all right.
that's one of those ones that are burned in me, and I think we talked about it earlier. Sometimes our kids go back to school, we have a little trauma associated with our prior experiences, and that
Yeah.
one stayed with me and always changed how I approached education because of that one person.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that those things happen and there's no excuse for it.
Well, and I think every disability is gonna present different challenges, and every family is gonna present a unique perspective to education. So
Yeah.
it's being flexible that knowing our family's gonna be one way, your family may be another,
Mhm.
but we can all work together in a unified front with the teachers, with the administration to make sure all kids are receiving the services that they need.
Yeah. Good point. And I think it's important. It's not about doing it all. It's about creating a system that works for your family, not someone else's family, and not the schools. The school is working for you. They're the ones that a whole group of professionals came together and decided that she needed that. And yet she wanted to deny it
Right.
because she was a principal and she felt she could. That's unfortunate. And
And we're
hopefully that's not going to be something that other people deal with, but it will be.
Yeah, and the truth is, back to school can bring up a lot of big emotions. In our case, especially if we've had some hard experiences with the
Mhm.
system that didn't see our child clearly always. But that's okay. That's how we get through it. And that's what we are as a community in this podcast, is knowing we're not alone.
Well, maybe you're holding grief, the hope, the fear, exhaustion all at once. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot, you know, it can feel very overwhelming, but the first step is prepping and the drop off.
Yes. Maybe hide those tears a little, right? And whatever it looks like, because it may look different for me that it did for you, but just reminding parents and caregivers out there that you're doing the best you can. Your child is lucky to have you, and you're definitely not alone.
I think another thing too is that having you as a friend also helped me advocate better for Morgan or even my other kids. I think by building a community of other parents in the school and other friends that are going through similar situations, it helps you guys talk through some of the different accommodations that might be available that you weren't even aware of. Morgan has vision issues, so we were in contact with the lighthouse for the blind. We had this one thing that she could put a book under and then it would project it on this big screen above so then she could actually see the pictures in colors better. She loved books and that was a way for her to be able to see. I didn't know any of that was available.
So she could just enjoy the book itself by being bigger on the wall.
Yeah. But just meeting other families and being able to talk, support each other will help you in the long run.
Absolutely. And, that's one of the reasons we have a TikTok channel and an Instagram page because we want to share these things with other families, especially for those whose kids are newly diagnosed. Knowing you're not alone, that we're all in this together, and that we're in the club of having kids with medical issues and disabilities. And we've learned a few things along the way, and I'm still learning ways to better support my kids, even though they're in college.
Mhm.
So I love having this platform to share our tips and tricks, but also to learn from other people what's worked for them and how we can better support them. And we're just so thankful for the community we're starting to develop here at Strength Happens. And we're so appreciative for you all joining us today as we talk a little bit about back to school. We hope that maybe you've walked away today with some tools, maybe some peace, and maybe just a little more confidence going into the new school year for yourself and your kiddos.
And we did create a free back to school checklist and a student snapshot. The link is going to be in the show notes, and it'll also be on the Hallie Grace Foundation Strength Happens page.
Absolutely. And if you found this helpful, we would love if you want to share it with a fellow parent who might be prepping for their own back to school transition with their kiddos. And that's how we grow this community, one real conversation at a time.
And next week, we're going to talk about dorm room drop offs and disability plans for your college student. And we get that a large percentage of our listeners, their kids may never go to college, but we also want to provide some information because Jill is a disability advocate at her college. So she has a lot of information to share for your kids that have five of them, because you may not even know what's even available.
Absolutely. So, whether your kiddos go into a 4 year university, a local program, or a community college, we'll have a few tips and tricks for how to navigate disability services at the college level. We'll also be sharing our own personal stories, what surprised us about dorm room drop off, what helped, and how we're navigating the emotional roller coaster of the big letting go. It goes beyond kindergarten into college. So make sure you subscribe and follow us, and we'll look forward to chatting with you next